But a lot of great thinkers, Richard Feynman, Albert Einstein, made the point that unless you can explain something clearly to someone else, you don't actually understand it. That point of explanation is what really sets apart the true expert from someone who kind of knows but muddles through. Because when you have to explain something to someone else, it forces you to clarify your thought. There can't be any gray areas in there. And I think Watson becomes essential to Sherlock Holmes because he forces him to actually go back and go through his reasoning, which Holmes hasn't done. The first time he does it with Watson, most people don't remember Holmes saying this, but it's hard for him. He says, wait, I'm actually not sure how I knew. Let me go back and let me retrace the steps. And as their relationship develops, it becomes easier. And I think Watson actually helps him think. At some point later in the stories, Watson tells the reader actually that he's become a habit, just like the violin, just like the pipe, that he's now something that Holmes looks to in order to be able to reason clearly. And I think Watson keeps him sharp, and Watson enables him to keep learning because he can see the shortcomings of his own reasoning when he talks it through to Watson in a way that he can't if he just talks it through in his own mind. And I think that for any genius, that's probably an incredibly useful thing to have. And I think a lot of great men and women over the ages have had some confidants, some sidekicks, someone who they could actually talk to and reason through to. And I think that's something that's immensely helpful. Yeah, I mean, I think Holmes's brain attic is actually a very useful way of thinking about our minds. The only difference between a physical attic and your brain attic is that you can make your brain attic expand a little bit more than a physical attic by making sure that it's very orderly, that you've stored things properly, that you've encoded them properly. If we take the attic analogy, that you've labeled the boxes the way that will facilitate retrieval, that you know where everything is. But I think in the modern world, we're not as limited actually as Holmes was. So he had his brain and he had his physical files that he kept at 221B Baker Street. And he had to remember, oh, I remember this case. I need to look it up though because I don't have all of the particulars in my brain attic because that was information that was not relevant enough to store up there. And in the modern day, we have constant ability to look things up. There was actually a very interesting study done at Columbia by Betsy Sparrow on the Google effect on memory. And what she found was that when people knew that they could look something up later, they forgot it. They just remembered where they could look it up. So Google, in essence, made their memories worse in one way, but not quite, because the brain was actually being smart. It said, okay, it was almost deciding for you, you don't need to store this in the brain attic because you know that you will be able to access it later. So what I'm going to do for you is remember where I can go to look this up. And so I feel like if we use that efficiently, this can be an age of great opportunity for us to maximize our mental resources and really use our brain attics for those things that really need to be in there. But it's also easy to fall back on it a little too much, and then we have an empty attic, and that's not a good thing. We can't, just like our memories are fallible, and memory is incredibly fallible. Sometimes we're positive that we remember the way that something happened, but we actually don't at all. One of my favorite, very disturbing studies was about 9/11, where people asked, experimenters asked the day after, and then a few years later, about the first tower falling. Do you remember? And obviously that was never captured on television, but people in the experiment remembered this vividly, and they could talk about that tower falling, and they never saw it. And so our memories are like that. We remember vividly things that never happened. We change details. And so I think it's essential to remember that, both about our own memory and about, as you say, the software and this enhanced storage, that everything can be faulty and that we really have to be careful. Holmes would never just do a Google search and take it for granted. I think he would make sure to verify, to cross-verify, to really try to get to the source of absolutely anything. He certainly wouldn't use Wikipedia.